Welcome and welcome back. I'm B. Today we're talking about something we don't see too often in horror, black folks surviving. Now there's a long-running joke that the black character always dies first in horror movies, but that's more of a myth than a hard rule. While it's true that black characters haven't always been given the best treatment in horror, they don't always die first, and some actually make it to the end. So today I'm highlighting the black characters who survived. Some barely scraped by, some were badass the whole way through, and some, well, let's just say they got lucky. Now, this isn't meant to be a comprehensive list, so every single black character who survived horror won't be discussed. But if there's someone I didn't mention that you think deserves a shout out, drop them in the comments. Now let's get into it. First up, we have Kincaid, played by Ken Sagoes in A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors. Kincaid is a part of a group of teens stuck in a psychiatric hospital who have to face off against Freddy Krueger. Unlike some of his friends, Kincaid isn't going out without a fight. Y'all don't talk about Kincaid enough for me. He's one of my favorite black characters who survived a horror movie. Kincaid had a tough exterior, but he really cared about his friends. He didn't just look out for himself, he was there when it mattered. He helped the others, he stood by them when things got bad, and he fought alongside them. He also brought some much needed humor to the movie. His lines were some of the most memorable, and his energy made him stand out in a cast full of great characters. And when it was time to fight, he didn't hesitate. That's why Kincaid is one of the best survivors in horror. Before we move on, I have to give a shout out to Lawrence Fishburne, who played Max in A Nightmare on Elm Street 3. Max is an orderly at the psychiatric hospital where the Elm Street kids are staying. Unlike some of the other staff, he actually cares about the patients and tries to look out for them. But since he's not a part of their group, he's not really on Freddy's radar. His role is smaller and he's not involved in the fight against Freddy, but in a franchise where most people don't make it, it's still worth mentioning. Since Max wasn't one of the Elm Street kids, Freddy wasn't really focused on him, which is probably why he got to walk away. But still, this is Lawrence Fishburne, and anytime he's in a horror movie and lives, it deserves a shout out. Next up is Jeryline, played by Jada Pinkett Smith in Tales from the Crypt, Demon Knight. In this movie, a drifter named Breaker arrives at a boarding house carrying a mysterious key filled with the blood of Christ. He's being hunted by the Collector, a demonic entity who wants the key to unleash hell on earth. Jeryline is one of the people trapped in the house with them, and by the end of the movie, she's the last one standing. Jeryline doesn't get nearly enough credit as a final girl. She starts off as someone who's just trying to survive the night like everyone else. But by the end, she steps up and takes on the responsibility of being the new key bearer. She doesn't just make it out alive, she wins. She outsmarts the Collector and uses the key's power against him and walks away ready to continue the fight. What I love about Jeryline is that she never backs down, even when she's terrified. The Collector tries to tempt her, break her spirit, and manipulate her, but she doesn't fall for it. She's strong, smart, and by the end, she's a force. I've always wanted to see a continuation of her story. What happens next? She's out there on the run, protecting this key, knowing that the demons are going to come for her. That's a sequel that I would love to see. Now let's talk about Rodger, played by Alvin Alexis in Night of the Demons. A group of teens decides to throw a Halloween party at an abandoned funeral parlor, which of course turns out to be haunted. One by one, they start getting possessed by demons and things go downhill fast. Rodger, being one of the only people with common sense, realizes early on that they need to get out, but unfortunately it's not that easy. I love that more and more people have been giving Rodger love lately because he's easily one of the most relatable horror survivors. Rodger's reactions completely real. He sees things going sideways and immediately wants no part of it. He's not trying to play a hero, he's not trying to investigate, he's just trying to live, and honestly, I respect that. What makes Rodger stand out is that a lot of horror characters make dumb decisions, but Rodger, he does what most black folks would probably do. He runs. And not just a half-hearted horror movie jog either. He's out. He's doing whatever he has to do to get away. And let's not forget, this was the 80s when black horror characters weren't making it to the credits. The fact that Rodger survives makes him even more iconic. He was scared, he ran, and because of that, he lived. Simple as that. Next up is Joel, played by Dwayne Martin in Scream 2. Joel is Gail Weathers' new cameraman, stepping in after her last one was brutally killed during the events of Scream 1. He's supposed to document the ongoing murders at Windsor College. But when Ghostface starts picking people off, Joel starts questioning if this job is even worth it. Joel, like Rodger, was not here for the nonsense. As soon as things started getting messy, he makes the smartest decision in horror history. He leaves. No hesitation, no maybe I should stick around and see what happens. Just straight up self preservation. He tells Gail, I'm out, and disappears for most of the movie. And that's exactly why he survived. He doesn't get involved, doesn't try to play detective, doesn't make reckless choices. He knew the deal. Being near Ghostface is a death sentence, so he removed himself from the situation entirely. Then at the very end, when it's all over, he comes back. Smartest man in the movie, more horror characters should take notes from Joel. Alright, now we have Ronnie played by LL Cool J in Halloween H2O. Ronnie is a security guard at Hillcrest Academy where Laurie Strode has been living under a new identity. He is just trying to do his job, keep an eye on things, and work on his side hustle as a romance novelist. But of course, Michael Myers shows up and suddenly his night gets a whole lot worse. LL Cool J is a scream king. He survived 2 horror movies within a year of each other. At this point, I'm convinced he has it written into his contract that he must survive. Ronnie isn't your typical horror movie security guard who gets taken out early. He actually makes it to the end despite getting shot. What makes Ronnie memorable is that he's one of the few comedic relief characters who actually lives. Usually, if you're cracking jokes in a slasher, your days are numbered. But Ronnie, he beats the odds and walks away. LL Cool J really set the standard for rappers in horror movies with this one. Next up, we have Preacher, played by LL Cool J. In Deep Blue Sea, Preacher is the head chef at an underwater research facility where scientists are experimenting on sharks to find a cure for Alzheimer's. But because this is a horror movie, the shark becomes hyper-intelligent and starts taking people out one by one. Preacher ends up fighting for his life against these creatures while somehow managing to keep his humor intact. Preacher had every reason to die in this movie. He was cracking jokes, he had a pet bird, and he was not a part of the main research team. Those are 3 solid red flags in horror movies. But somehow, against all odds, he lives. And he doesn't just survive, he fights. He literally stabs a shark in the eye with a cross, blows another one up, and delivers some of the funniest lines in the movie. He's proof that being smart, a little lucky, and knowing when to get the hell out of danger can keep you alive. LL Cool J really had a 2 for 2 horror survival streak, and that is impressive. Now, going back to the Halloween franchise, I would be remiss not to mention Freddie Harris, played by Busta Rhymes in Halloween Resurrection. Freddie is a producer of Dangertainment, a reality show that sends a group of young adults to spend the night in Michael Myers' childhood home, completely unaware that Michael is still lurking. What starts as a publicity stunt quickly turns into a fight for survival when Michael starts picking them off one by one. Freddie isn't just a survivor, he also fights back like LL Cool J. Most people run from Michael Myers, but Freddie, he goes toe to toe with him multiple times, drop kicks him, and even hits him with some kung fu moves. And somehow he lives to tell the tale. Is Halloween Resurrection one of the best movies in the franchise? Absolutely not. It's actually terrible. But Freddie Harris surviving makes it worth talking about. He wasn't just lucky, he stood his ground, delivered some corny lines, and walked away alive. If that's not iconic, I don't know what is. Keeping on the theme of rappers in horror movies, next up is Ice Cube as Danny in Anaconda. Danny is a part of a documentary crew traveling deep into the Amazon to film a project about an indigenous tribe. But things take a wild turn when they pick up a shady snake hunter who drags them into his obsession with capturing a massive anaconda. As you can guess, it does not go well for most of them. Danny is one of the smartest people in this movie. From the jump, he's side-eyeing the snake hunter, questioning the nonsense, and making it clear he's not about to be anybody's fool. He's cautious, pays attention, and unlike some of his crewmates, he actually has common sense. He fights, he stays sharp, and most importantly, he makes it. One of the best things about Danny's survival is that it feels earned. He doesn't just get lucky, he actively avoids making dumb decisions, helps take down the villain, and gets out of the jungle alive. Danny brought the perfect mix of attitude, humor, and survival instinct, and that's why he's on the list. Yet another rapper who plays a character that survives a horror movie. Next up is Rodger as Maggie in 13 Ghosts. Maggie's a nanny for Arthur's children, and she ends up getting dragged into the nightmare that is 13 Ghosts, a glass-walled house that turns out to be a death trap filled with violent spirits. As the ghosts are unleashed, people start getting picked off and chaos takes over. Maggie is another black final girl who doesn't get talked about enough. She spends most of the movie calling out exactly what's wrong with the situation. She didn't sign up for all of this, she's not here for the bull, and she makes that very clear. And let's not forget, Maggie actually helps save the day. She plays a role in stopping the machine that's controlling the ghosts which ultimately helps everyone who's still alive get out of there. Then at the end, she quits, which is a completely reasonable response. She's over it and she's not sticking around for any follow ups or explanations. Survival secured. Next up, we have the it girl of the 90s, the vocal Bible herself, Brandy Norwood, as Karla in I Still Know What You Did Last Summer. Karla is Julie's best friend and she wins a trip for 4 to the Bahamas. She brings her boyfriend Tyrell, Julie, and Will, a guy she encourages Julie to date. What starts as a fun getaway quickly turns into a nightmare where they realize they've been set up and the fisherman is back for revenge. Karla goes through so much in this movie, running for her life, dodging death multiple times, and even falling off a glass roof. But despite everything, she refuses to give up. While she doesn't necessarily fight back in the traditional sense, she does what most people would do in a slasher situation. She keeps moving. She avoids the killer as much as she can and finds a way to make it to the end. And in a movie where most people don't make it, that's worth recognizing. Also, let's be real, if you were in a slasher movie in the 90s, your chances of survival weren't great if you weren't the main character and if you were black. But Karla made it, and Brandy playing her is iconic. Next up, we have Eddie Barker, played by Taye Diggs in House on Haunted Hill, 1999. Eddie is one of the guests invited to a supposedly haunted asylum where the host, Stephen Price, has promised a cash prize to anyone who could survive the night. But it doesn't take long before things turn deadly, and the group realizes they're trapped inside with actual ghosts looking to add them to the body count. I don't see y'all talking about Eddie a lot either. Eddie is one of the few characters who actually makes it out alive, even though he barely escapes by the skin of his teeth. In the final moments, the ghosts try to drag him into the darkness, and it looks like he's about to die, but at the last second, Ghost Pritchett saves him, helping him escape alongside Sarah. Without that, Eddie wouldn't have made it. Again, let's be real, this was a late 90s horror remake, and black characters weren't exactly making it to the end credits, so Eddie surviving, that's a win. Up next, we have Fool, played by Brandon Adams in The People Under the Stairs. Fool, whose real name is Poindexter, is a 13-year-old kid from LA whose family is being evicted from their apartment by their landlords. He gets roped into a break-in at his landlord's house to steal money to pay for his mother's cancer treatment. But once inside, he discovers that these aren't just any rich slumlords. They're completely deranged, hiding a dark secret in their basement. As Fool fights to escape, he realizes he has to outsmart them if he wants to make it out alive. Fool is one of the most resourceful horror survivors, period. He's a kid going up against 2 armed psychopaths in their own home, and somehow he not only survives, he wins. He figures out their twisted system, outsmarts their traps, and takes them down. Most horror survivors barely scrape by, but Fool, he flips the script. He doesn't just escape, he makes sure the people they've been tormenting are free, and he destroys their operation on the way out. For a movie that's part horror, part social commentary, Fool's survival isn't just about making it to the credits, it's about beating the system, and that's what makes him one of the best survivors in horror. Next up, we have Chris Winslow, played by Sinclair Daniel in Insidious: The Red Door. Chris is a quirky first-year college student who ends up befriending Dalton, the son of Josh Lambert. She gets dragged into his supernatural family drama when strange things start happening around him, and before she knows it, she's way too close to the further for comfort. Chris started off just trying to be a good friend, but once she got hemmed up by the red-faced demon, she realized real quick that she wanted no parts of this. And honestly, I don't blame her. What helped Chris survive was that she had enough sense to recognize danger when she saw it. As soon as things started getting weird, she took it seriously and she never went looking for trouble. She spent most of the movie telling Dalton to stop messing with things he didn't understand, and she was right. But even though she knew better, she still stuck around to help him when things went bad. The difference is she didn't recklessly throw herself into danger. She helped without putting herself directly in harm's way. And when she got the chance to leave safely, she took it. Chris made it because she wasn't hard-headed like most horror characters. She saw what was happening, respected the fact that she was out of her depth, and didn't make things worse for herself. A lot of people in horror could learn from that. Alright, now we have Angela, played by Lydia Jewett, and her father Victor, played by Leslie Odom Jr., in The Exorcist Believer. Angela and her best friend Catherine go missing in the woods for 3 days, and when they return, it's clear that something isn't right. What starts as strange behavior quickly escalates into full-blown demonic possession, and Victor is forced to confront forces beyond his understanding to try and save his daughter. There aren't a lot of demonic possession horror movies that center a black family, so I really appreciated this movie for that. Angela's survival is huge because let's be real, in exorcism movies, the possessed person doesn't always make it out alive. And while this movie gives us two possessed girls, only one family gets their child back, and that's Victor and Angela. Victor's survival is also worth noting because he started out as someone who didn't believe in any of this. He was skeptical, didn't trust religious practices, and wanted to handle things logically. But when it came down to it, he did everything he could to save his daughter. For me, this movie is elevated by the fact that the black family survives. So often in horror, especially in possession movies, black characters aren't even a part of the story, let alone making it to the end. So seeing both Angela and Victor survive, that's something we don't see enough of. Next up, we have Jazelle, played by Patricia Belcher in Jeepers Creepers 1. Jazelle is a psychic who has terrifying visions about Trish, Derry, and the Creeper. She tries to warn them that something is evil that's after them. But like most horror movie warnings, hers are ignored until it's too late. Now, Jazelle definitely falls into the magical Negro trope, the wise black character who exists mainly to help the white protagonist by warning them about their fate. It's a frustrating trope, but at the same time, I'm glad that she survived. Jazelle doesn't just give them a vague warning and disappears. She sticks around to help. She tells them what she's seen in her visions, explaining that the creeper chooses its victims based on fear and does her best to prepare them. And even though she knows the future isn't looking good for them, she still stays involved. What makes her survival stand out is that she's one of the few people in the movie who truly understands the creeper, yet she doesn't get taken out for it. She plays her part, does what she can to help, and by the end, she's still alive. In a movie where the creeper is wiping people out left and right, that's something. Last but definitely not least, we have Chris Washington, played by Daniel Kaluuya, in Get Out. Chris is a black photographer who goes on a weekend trip with his white girlfriend Rose to meet her parents. What starts as an awkward family visit quickly turns into a nightmare when he realizes he's been lured into a twisted operation that steals the bodies of black people for white buyers. Chris has to fight his way out before he loses himself, literally. I love that Jordan Peele made the decision to let Chris survive without going to prison. In an alternate ending, Chris was supposed to get arrested for everything that happened, which have been a tragic but all too real outcome. But instead, he makes it out alive with no prison time, and it's his friend Rod who saves him. That moment was such a relief. Chris's survival isn't just about making it to the credits, it's about reclaiming his freedom. He goes through absolute hell, barely escapes, and just when it seems like it might all go wrong, the TSA car pulls up instead of the cops. Seeing Rod step out and knowing Chris was safe, that was the ending that we needed. After everything he endured, he deserved to make it out, and thankfully he did. Alright folks, that's the list. Again, this wasn't a comprehensive list, and I may do a part 2, we'll see. Anyway, these characters defied the odds and survived their horror movies, some with brains, some with luck, and some just by getting out of there at the right time. Let me know in the comments who's your favorite black horror survivor. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more horror content.